Hello, this is Shelby and Olivia from Curious Cat Crime Sunday. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode. And today's episode is going to be on Dennis Rader, otherwise known as the BTK Strangler. BTK was born Dennis Lynn Rader on March 9, 1945, and is an American serial killer, otherwise known as BTK, which is an abbreviation of Bind, Torture, and Kill, also known as BTK Strangler or the BTK Killer. He was active between 1974 and 1991, during which time he killed 10 people in Wichita and Park City, Kansas. He sent taunting letters to police and media outlets describing the details of his crime. After a decade-long hiatus, Rader resumed sending letters in 2004, which led to his 2005 arrest and subsequent guilty plea. He is currently serving 10 consecutive life sentences in El Dorado Correctional Facility. Let's get into the story. Rader was born to Dorothea May Rader, her surname is Cook, and William Elvin Rader, one of 4 sons. Sources give Rader's place of birth as either Columbus, Kansas, or Pittsburgh, Kansas. He grew up in Wichita, and both parents worked long hours and paid little attention to their children at home. Rader later described feeling ignored by his mother, and in particular resenting her for it. At a young age, Rader harbored sadistic sexual fantasies about torturing trapped and helpless women. He also exhibited zoosadism by torturing, killing, and hanging small animals. Rader acted out his sexual fantasies for voyeurism and many other things. He often spled on female neighbors while dressed in women's clothing, including women's underwear that he had stolen, and did things to himself with rope and other bindings around his arm and neck. Years later, during his cooling-off periods between murders, Rader would take pictures of himself wearing women's clothing, a female mask, while bound. He later admitted that he was pretending to be his victims as part of an sexual fantasy. However, Rader kept his sexual proclivities well hidden, and he was widely regarded in his community as normal, polite, and well-mannered. Again, being another serial killer that many would have never guessed to have been the one who was doing these crimes. After graduating from Wichita Heights High School, Rader attended Kansas Wesleyan University, but received mediocre grades and dropped out after only 1 year. He served in the United States Air Force from 1966 to 1970. On discharge, he moved to Park City, a suburb of Wichita, where he worked in the meat department at IGA Supermarket, where his mother was a bookkeeper. Rader married Paula Dietz on May 22, 1971. They had 2 children, Carrie and Brian, and he attended Butler County Community College in El Dorado, earning an associate's degree in electronics in 1973. He was enrolled in Wichita State University and graduated in 1979 with a Bachelor's of Science degree, majoring in Administration of Justice. In May of 1991, Rader worked as a dog catcher and a compliance officer in Park City. In this position, neighbors recalled him being somewhat overzealous and extremely strict, as well as taking special pleasure in bullying and harassing single women. One neighbor complained that Rader had killed her dog for no reason. Rader was also a member of Christ Lutheran Church, in Wichita, and had been elected president of the church council. He was also a Cub Scout leader. The church part will become very important later in this story. On January 15, 1974, Rader committed his first murders, strangling 4 family members, including 2 children, in their Wichita home. The mother had worked for Coleman, and male excretion was found at the scene, though none of the victims had been actually assaulted. Rader took a watch from the home, and he would acquire souvenirs, often underwear, from subsequent victims. In April 1974, Rader targeted a 21-year-old woman who was another Coleman employee. After breaking into her house, however, he also encountered her brother, who managed to escape despite being shot twice. Rader fatally stabbed the woman after fleeing. Later in the year, he wrote a letter detailing the January murders, saying that the code word for me will be bind them, torture them, kill them, BTK. He left the note in a book in a Wichita public library. It was eventually discovered by police. Over the next 2 decades, Rader killed 5 more women. His sixth victim was strangled on March 1977 after he locked her 3 young children in the bathroom. I was watching a documentary on this, and they explained that the children were banging on the door and screaming, and that the mother had decided, as he said, "If you do what I say, then I will not harm you." So she complied and she did what he said. She unfortunately did not make it, but the kids were able to break a window, get out, go to the neighbor's house, and the neighbor came over, found the mother had a bag around her neck along with a rope around her neck. Unfortunately, as I said, she did not make it, but the children were alive. And this is, as they put it, was due to the fact that the phone rang and the children were screaming and banging on the door, and all he wanted was to act out his fantasy, and this was not his fantasy. So essentially, the children and the phone were able to save their children's lives. Following the death of his next victim in 1977 in December, Rader grew irritated by the lack of media coverage. In a letter to a local TV station, he wrote, and I quote, "How many people do I have to kill before I get my name in the paper or some national attention?" End quote. The resulting coverage helped set off a panic. Rader then waited 8 years before murdering a neighbor in her home in 1985. He reportedly later took her body to his church, where he had hidden things that he needed for photographs, and photographed her in a bondage setting. A 28-year-old mother of 2 was killed in 1986, and in 1991, Rader committed his last murder, strangling 62-year-old woman in her secluded home. The case subsequently went cold. There is a show called Very Scary People that I watched that did a 2-part episode on Dennis Rader. And something I learned, this is going back a little bit to where I spoke about the murders, but the Otero family, the 4 people that died, were not the only members of the family. There were 3 older children who were not there as they were in school. One of the brothers had found the parents, and when the older brother walked in, he saw his mother's purse and the insides of the purse strewn about, and he said, "Something is not right." So he said, "Hello, is anyone home?" And I believe it was his younger brother yelled out, "Quick, come, Mom and Dad are playing a game." He goes in there. Now, this is the older brother. He knows something is wrong. He takes his family, his brother and his sister outside, and the younger brother goes to the neighbor's house to call for help. They call 911, or actually, I believe they call the operator at the time. 911 was not a thing at the time. So they call the operator, and the police come. They say, "What's going on here?" And he said, "Someone's killed my parents." So they go inside, and they come back out, and they say, "Do you think your dad could have done it?" Now that's where that ends there in the show. But something that was very sad to me was that they didn't notice that the other 2, the brother and the sister, the younger children, were also deceased inside the house. And so the older brother was standing outside waiting for them to come home because he didn't want them to see the scene. And he was finally told by police that Joseph Otero Jr. and Josephine Otero were also deceased inside the house. And this was actually coming from the older brother, and it was just a very heartbreaking scene to watch as he was talking about his family's murder when he was at such a young age himself. While listening to my audio tapes, one thing I realized I missed is how they actually caught him. So, Rader was sending messages both to the media and to the police, taunting them. I think I did mention that part at least above. And he had sent out a letter, and he was like, "I'm going to send you more information, but I need to know the truth. Tell me the truth," he says. And he says, can you trace a floppy disk? So, of course, the police say no, there's absolutely no way to trace a floppy disk. And many of you may not know what a floppy disk is. It was before CDs, it was how we saved things at the time. And so he sends this floppy disk. I don't know if it had pictures or if it was a letter, but it had something on it. And they were able to see that it was at Christ Lutheran Church under the name Dennis. So if they go there and they find the Dennises rather, and they see Dennis Rader, and they notice he's the president of the committee, and they watch over his house, and they're watching to wait to see if he's in the car that was seen at the scene of one of the crimes, and they see the car, and so they decide to get a DNA swab. Now, it wasn't said if he complied and gave one, or if they maybe found something in his trash and were able to test it, but they were able to at that time because DNA profiling had become much better, and they were able to prove, yes, that he was the person who left male excretion at the scene of the murders. So that was how they were able to catch him, was by essentially lying to him and telling him they couldn't trace this floppy disk.
Rader was arrested while driving near his home in Park City shortly after noon on February 25, 2005. An officer asked, and I quote, "Mr. Rader, do you know why you're going downtown?" End quote. Rader replied, and I quote, "Oh, I have suspicions why." End quote. The Wichita Police, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and the ATF agents searched Rader's home and vehicle, seizing evidence including computer equipment, a pair of black pantyhose retrieved from a shed, a cylindrical container, the church he attended, his office at City Hall, and the main branch of the Park City Library were also searched. At a press conference the next morning, Wichita Police Chief Norman Williams announced the bottom line: BTK is arrested. On May 3rd, the judge entered a not guilty plea on Rader's behalf, as Rader did not speak at his arraignment. However, on June 27th, the scheduled trial date, Rader changed his plea to guilty. He described the murders in details and made no apologies. I listened to some of this, and I would add the audio, but it is very long and drawn out, and I don't know if we have enough time in this video, nor do I have the ability to edit out some of the words that cannot be said on YouTube. Also, you'll notice some words that I say are in an odd manner. It's only because I cannot say the actual words on this channel. At Rader's August 18th sentencing, victims' families made statements, after which Rader apologized in a rambling 30-minute monologue that the prosecutors likened to the academic award acceptance speech. His statement has been described as an example of often observed phenomenon among psychopaths: their inability to understand the emotional content of language. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences with a minimum of 175 years. Kansas has no death penalty at the time for murderers. On August 19th, he was moved to El Dorado Correctional Facility. Rader talked about inane topics such as weather during the 40-minute drive to El Dorado, but began to cry when the victim's family statements from the court proceeding came on the radio. He is now in solitary confinement for his protection, with 1 hour of exercise per day and a shower 3 times per week. This will likely continue indefinitely. Beginning in 2006, he was allowed access to television, radio, and to read magazines and other privileges for good behavior. Another side note, and this is just my thoughts, but Rader was actually given a bail. And that seriously surprises me considering he confessed to the crimes. Now, I don't know if this bail was set before his confession or after, but it seems to me this is the kind of thing that bail should be taken away from, should not be given for. I know they made it US $10 million, but still, there should be no bail in my opinion. Just a quick sidebar, but have you ever noticed how some serial killers, or just murderers in general, tend to study criminal justice in the university? I find that kind of interesting. Thank you for tuning in. This has been another episode of Curious Cat Crime Sunday. Remember, if you liked the video, to like, subscribe, and comment. I will get back to you as soon as possible. And I hope you guys have a great week. See you back here next week, same time, same place.